The wind screamed across the frozen wasteland. Snow fell like ashes from a dying sky. Inside, a half-buried bunker made of old starship parts. A human named Jace sat near a small heater. The fire inside flickered weakly, struggling against the bitter cold. He had just finished eating a thin can of protein soup when he heard 3 slow knocks on the metal door. Jace froze. Nobody came out this far, not unless they were lost or dangerous or both. He picked up his old plasma rifle and stepped quietly toward the door. The bunker's camera was broken, so he couldn't see who it was. Another knock came, slower this time. Then a pause, then a voice, soft and shaking. "Please, help us. Just one hot meal for my daughter." Jace's grip on the rifle tightened. A woman's voice. But that meant nothing. People lied. Aliens lied more. There was silence, then the voice spoke again, quieter, like she had lost all hope. "I'll be yours tonight, if that's what you want. Just don't let her die." Jace's heart twisted. He wasn't a good man. Not anymore. But he wasn't a monster either. He pressed a button, and the heavy door creaked open slightly. Outside stood an alien woman, her skin pale blue, almost gray. From the cold, her arms wrapped tightly around a small bundle, a child. The little girl's face was barely visible beneath the torn blanket. Her eyes were open, but empty. Her skin a strange shade of blue. Her feet were bare. Purple from frostbite, Jace stepped back, motioning them inside. The woman hesitated, like she thought it was a trap. Then she stepped in, slowly, carefully, never taking her eyes off him. Once the door closed, warmth slowly began to return to the air. The woman lowered the child near the fire and unwrapped her. Jace knelt beside her and looked at the girl's feet. "Too cold," he muttered. "Much too cold." He handed the woman a thermal wrap, then ran to grab the last sealed meal pack from his shelf. It wasn't much, just heated stew and a metal pouch butt to them. It must have smelled like heaven. The woman took it, but didn't eat. She fed her daughter first, bit by bit, whispering to her gently in a strange language. The girl didn't speak, just blinked slowly, eyes still dull. Jace watched them, unsure what to say. The woman finally looked up at him, her lips trembling. "Thank you," she said. "You saved her." He nodded once. "What's your name?" "Niera," she replied. "Her name is Leary." Jace didn't ask any more. Not yet. He didn't trust Easy. And neither did she, as Leary started to breathe more evenly. Niera wrapped her in the warm cloth and leaned back. Her shoulders dropped, like she hadn't rested in days. Jace noticed marks on her arms, burned scars. "Maybe, or slave branding." "You were running," he said. It wasn't a question. Niera didn't answer. She stared into the heater's flames and whispered, "They were going to sell me again." After taking her, Jace clenched his jaw. He had heard of things like that: Talian trade routes, slave ships, underground markets where children were separated from their mothers. It was disgusting. It was real. Leary let out a soft breath and curled into Niera's lap. Finally asleep, Jace leaned back in his chair and sighed. He had just made himself a target. He knew that. "I don't need anything from you," he said. After a long silence, "I don't want your body or promises." Niera looked at him, eyes wide. "I just didn't want her to die." She said quietly, "That's all." "I know," he replied. "Get some rest. We'll talk in the morning." But even as he said it, Jace walked to his gear closet and took out his old rifle again. He didn't trust the silence outside. Someone would come looking. He was sure of it. And when they did, they'd find a human, ready to fight, and 2 lives he now refused to give up. Jace didn't sleep that night. Not really. He sat in the corner of the room with his rifle across his lap, eyes watching the heater's soft glow reflect off the metal walls. Across from him, Niera lay on the floor with her daughter in her arms. both wrapped in a thick thermal blanket. The girl, Leary, had stopped shivering. But she still hadn't spoken. Her chest rose and fell gently, like someone who had been holding in fear for far too long. At some point, Naira opened her eyes and looked at Jace through the firelight. She didn't speak, and neither did he, but something passed between them, quiet understanding that danger wasn't far. Jace finally stood and handed her a warm pouch of tea, the last one he had. She took it without a word and sipped slowly, her hands trembling slightly. "You didn't have to offer yourself," Jace said at last, his voice low. "I wouldn't have turned you away." Naira looked down, her voice almost a whisper. Most would have silence followed again. This time heavier. Outside, the wind howled across the frozen plains, loud enough to mask footsteps. Jace hated that thought. He had lived out here for years, alone, hiding from what was left of the galaxy. Now that peace was gone, Naira glanced toward the bunker's old radio unit, a broken mess of tangled wires and dead circuits. She stood up and moved toward it slowly. As if drawn by something, Jace watched her with narrowed eyes. He said nothing as she placed her hand on the dusty dial. Then he noticed her fingers, 2 of them were missing their nails, burned off. She pressed the dial gently, even though the radio wasn't connected. A quiet hum came from somewhere deep inside the walls. Jace stood fast, rifle raised. "That radio's dead," he said sharply. Naira didn't turn. Her lips moved silently, whispering in a language he couldn't understand. Then she stopped, slowly turned, and said, "It isn't dead anymore." Jace stepped forward and yanked the panel open. Inside, buried beneath dust and scraps, was a small black Shardalian tech, a signal booster. He had never seen it before. And this was his bunker. Naira didn't look afraid. She looked tired. "I didn't come here to betray you," she said. "I was being tracked. I didn't know it had already activated. You brought a signal into my home." Jace growled. "I might be dead by morning because of it. I know," she said, her voice breaking. "But I didn't have anywhere else to go." Jace looked at the girl still sleeping, then at the woman whose eyes now glistened with tears she refused to let fall. He lowered the rifle slowly. "How long do we have?" he asked. Naira hesitated. "If they picked up the signal, maybe hours." Jace muttered a curse under his breath and turned toward his supply crates. He started packing with fast hands. Food, medical kits, extra clothes. He handed Naira a knife and a shock rod. "You know how to use these." She nodded without hesitation. "I've had 2, Leary stirred and sat up, looking around in confusion. When she saw Naira packing, she let out a soft, scared sound. Naira dropped to her knees and hugged the child tight, whispering in her ear. Jace watched them and felt something twist in his chest. This wasn't just some alien mother and daughter. This was a family being hunted, and now they were his problem too. He didn't know why, but he didn't want to run from it, not this time. He glanced at the radio again, the faint hum still echoing like a warning bell. They were coming, whoever they were, and if he didn't move soon, they'd all be found. But Jace had been hunted before, and he had lived. So he grabbed his gear, slung the rifle over his shoulder, and said only one thing: "We move before the sun rises." Naira nodded once. Outside, far beyond the snowstorm, something in the sky flashed for a second. A light no storm could hide. Something was coming, and it wasn't coming to help. By the time the first pale light of morning touched the snow, Jace was already outside, covering their tracks with practiced hands. The wind had calmed, but the silence felt worse, heavier, like something was watching from beyond the white hills. Naira stayed close to Leary, her arm always around the child, who clutched a small metal charm tied around her neck. They moved quickly, but quietly. Following Jace through a broken path that led away from the bunker, none of them spoke. Words didn't matter right now. Only steps, breath, and speed. Jace had memorized every crack and curve of the valley. Every rock that could hide a sniper. Every tree line that wasn't really safe. Still, something felt wrong. About an hour into the walk, Jace raised his fist, signaling them to stop. He crouched low and studied the snow ahead. Footprints, wide and heavy, leading straight toward the bunker from the other direction. He hadn't made them, and neither had they. Someone else had been there. Maybe minutes ago, maybe still nearby. Niera pulled Leary close and dropped low behind a fallen log. Jace crept forward, one slow step at a time. He found what he was afraid of: burn marks on the snow. Not from fire, but from plasma boots. Bounty hunters, syndicate trained. No doubt, they didn't leave messages. They didn't ask questions. They just took what they came for. He returned to Niera and whispered, "They were at the bunker. We're being followed." Niera didn't blink. "I told you they would come," she said softly. Jace nodded. "Then let's make sure they don't catch us." They pushed deeper into the old mountain route. There was a small outpost further north, half buried and long abandoned, but with enough shelter to hide for a while. As they reached the edge of a frozen ravine, Leary suddenly stopped. She stared across the snow, her eyes wide, her body frozen. Jace turned fast, raising his rifle. "What is it?" Leary pointed silently across the ravine, just visible through the fog. A dark shape moved. Tall, armor-plated, slow but steady. It stopped too. It had seen them. Jace didn't think. He grabbed Niera's hand and pulled her toward the nearby. "Slope run," he growled. "Don't look back." Blaster fire cracked through the air as red streaks lit the snow. Jace fired over his shoulder. Hitting nothing but trees, they slid down the icy slope, crashing into the snow and stumbling forward through the brush. Niera held Leary tight against her chest as they rolled into a ditch. Gasping for breath, Jace stayed on his feet. Circling back, he dropped to his stomach behind a boulder, aiming carefully. Then he saw it. A hunter, black armor with glowing red veins. Slowly scanning the snow with a shoulder-mounted scope. Its eyes weren't eyes, they were sensors, heat seekers, smart enough to see through snow. Jace waited, heart pounding. He timed the movement and fired. The shot hit the hunter's scope, shattering it with a bright spark. The creature let out a sharp mechanical growl and turned blindly in the wrong direction. It fired wildly, lighting the trees with bursts of red flame. Jace used the moment to run. He dove into the ditch with Niera and Leary, breathing hard. "Just one?" she asked. "For now," Jace replied, "but there's always more." Leary finally spoke, her voice tiny. "He had the same mark as the man who took my uncle." Jace looked at her, surprised. "You remember him?" She nodded. "I don't forget." Niera touched her daughter's face gently. "That's why they want us back," she whispered. "She knows too much." Jace didn't ask how a child could know syndicate secrets. He didn't want to know yet. All he knew was that the snow would cover their tracks soon, but not fast enough. They needed to move, and they needed to do it without leaving a scent or signal. He looked at Niera. "Next shelter is 12 kilometers away," he said. She'll make it." Niera nodded, though her face was pale and tired. "She has too." Then, from behind the ridge, they heard another sound. A whistle, not from the wind. It was a hunter's signal, and it had just called for backup. Jace stood tall, rifle loaded. His eyes locked on the trail ahead. "We don't stop again," he said. "Not until we're safe. Or they're dead." Snow exploded behind them as another shot hit the frozen ground. Jace didn't turn this time. He just ran, his boots crunching through the frost. Niera was right behind him, holding Leary with both arms, running with the strength of a mother who had nothing left to lose. The child clung to her, silent and wide-eyed, her breath sharp and fast. They sprinted through the trees. Between jagged rocks and broken machines left from the old war, sparks flew as plasma bolts struck rusted metal, sending shards flying through the air. One tore past Jace's shoulder, burning through the edge of his coat. He didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. They reached a steep ridge. And without hesitation, Jace leaped down, sliding on his back across the ice. Neri followed. Leary held close to her chest. They landed hard, but alive, behind them. The hunter growled in frustration, was too big to follow directly, but it had called for backup, and backup always came fast. Jace pointed toward the canyon below. There, he said, breathless old mining station, covered strong walls. Good place to trap them. Nyera looked at him. Surprised you want to? Fight. I want to survive, he replied. Same thing. Sometimes the wind picked up again. This time, colder, sharper. Like the planet itself, new blood was about to be spilled. They ran until the metal walls of the mining station came into view. Half covered by snow and time, Jace smashed the keypad and forced the old door open. The hinges screeching in protest. Inside, the lights flickered weakly. Some still alive after all these years. Dust hung in the air, and old crates were stacked in corners. Untouched, Jace checked the perimeter quickly, then motioned for them to get low. This place was used for drills and storage, he whispered. Lots of tunnels. And explosives. Nyera laid Leary down in a dry corner, wrapping her in thick blankets. The child's lips were blue, but her eyes were focused. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried once since they met. Jace armed the place with traps motion. Wires, rigged charges, and shock mines he had carried for years and never used. Now was the time. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the silence returned to quiet suddenly. The station shook. Something heavy had landed on the roof. Jace raised his rifle. Nyera grabbed a steel pipe. And Leary crawled into a hiding spot without being told. Then the metal ceiling creaked, bent, and broke open with a crash. The hunter dropped down like a demon from the sky. Red eyes glowing, claws scraping the floor. It looked at Jace first, then at Nyera, then toward where Leary was hiding. It didn't speak. It didn't hesitate. It charged. Jace opened fire, his shots smashing into the hunter's chest plate. Denting it, slowing it, but not stopping it. Nyera struck from the side, swinging the pipe hard, slamming it into the back of its helmet. The creature spun, grabbed her by the throat, and lifted her off the ground. Leary screamed her first real scream, and it echoed through the station like a wave of light. In that second, Jace hit the final trigger. The charges exploded beneath the hunter's feet. Blowing the metal floor apart, the monster fell through. Down into the lower shaft, roaring as sparks and fire lit up the room. Ran forward and caught Nyera before she hit the ground. Her body shaking but alive. They crawled to Leary, pulled her close, and held her in the dark corner as the smoke filled the air. Below, the hunter's voice echoed in static. Broken but alive. You can't run forever. It hissed. You belong. To us, then silence. Real silence this time. Jace tightened his grip on the rifle. Nia looked at him with burning eyes. No longer afraid? He's right, she said. We can't keep running. Jace nodded slowly. Then we don't, he said. We make them run instead. Smoke drifted through the broken ceiling, and the cold crept back in. Jace pressed his ear to the floor, listening for movement below. There was nothing now, no static, no growl, no sound of armor scraping metal. But that didn't mean the hunter was gone. It just meant it was waiting. Nyera sat beside the heater unit they'd managed to restart, her face pale, Leary curled up in her lap. Finally asleep, but Jace could tell Nyera wasn't resting. Her eyes were open, staring at the fire. Like it held a map only she could read. They're not just bounty hunters, are they?" He asked quietly. Nair didn't answer at first. She placed a hand on Leary's hair, smoothing it gently, then looked up. "My family was part of a royal caste," she said, "when the war ended. The victors didn't want survivors. They wanted trophies. They took me and others like me, sold us to warlords, collectors, syndicates." She paused, her voice thin. "They couldn't kill me outright, but they could breed my blood into something useful." Jace turned away, jaw clenched. It made sense, now the marks on her arms. The strange shimmer in Leary's eyes. They weren't just survivors. They were valuable in a way that made monsters chase them across frozen worlds. "She's important," he said, glancing at the sleeping child. Niera nodded slowly. "She remembers codes, names, places. They trained her before she could walk. They were preparing her to be one of them." Jace exhaled sharply. "So you ran. I stole a guard's weapon and escaped during a trade," she said, her voice shaking now. "I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door." "You didn't," Jace said, standing up. "They were coming anyway, for someone else, for something else." "But now," he added, loading a new clip into his rifle, "now they'll find me ready." The old mining station had more to offer. Jace began exploring the lower tunnels, each step deeper into the bones of the mountain. He found what he was hoping for: explosives, heavy tools, and half-powered defense drones left behind by workers long gone. He spent the next hour rigging traps, creating fallback zones, rerouting energy to doors and pressure plates. Niara helped where she could, her hands steady even as her body trembled with exhaustion. At one point, Leary woke and walked to Jace, holding something in her small hands. It was a data crystal, old, scratched, but active. "Mother said to give you this if we stayed alive after the first attack." The girl whispered, "It shows what they did to us." Jace took it, inserted it into the wall reader, and watched as blurry images filled the screen. He saw cages, cold rooms, children strapped to machines, symbols carved into walls, and guards laughing in languages he didn't know. And in one frozen frame, Nairo chained, silent, her eyes blazing with fury. Jace looked at her, but she didn't flinch. "I want them to see what they made," she said, "before we burn it down." Outside, a low hum filled the air. Then came a thudding sound, multiple heavy boots in rhythm. Jace checked the motion sensors for blips. Closing fast, he turned to Naira. "Take Leary down to the last shaft. Seal the door behind you. And you?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Jace smiled grimly. "I'll slow them down." She hesitated, then pulled him close, her voice low but fierce. "Don't die for us." "Not dying," he replied, just making noise as Niera disappeared. Into the shadows with Leary, Jace stood alone in the main hall, surrounded by explosives, drones, and fire. He stared at the approaching signal, his grip firm, his heart steady. This wasn't about money anymore, or survival. This was about making sure monsters knew humans didn't run forever. And some doors, once opened, burned everything behind them. The walls shook as something heavy slammed into the front gate. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and lights flickered with each impact. Jace stood still in the center of the main hall, his rifle raised, the detonator in his left hand. The traps were armed, the charges set, and every escape tunnel closed behind him. He wasn't planning to win. He was planning to make them bleed. Another blast hit the gate, louder this time. Then came the sound of tearing metal. As claws ripped through the station's final defense, Jace didn't move. He needed them close inside. That's where the real pain would begin. The gate burst open in a flash of smoke and flame. 3 figures stepped through, tall and armored, their visors glowing like dying suns. Behind them, a 4th shape hovered in the shadows, larger, cloaked in shifting tech. Not a hunter, a handler. The one who gave orders. Jace took one step back, just enough to lead them in. The first hunter spotted him and charged. Claws outstretched, Jace pressed a switch on his belt, and the floor lit up for micromines burst beneath the creature's feet. It roared and dropped, armor smoking, legs twisted. The other two moved faster, flanking from both sides. Jace ducked behind a column and returned fire, hitting one in the chest with rapid bursts. It staggered, then dropped to one knee. But the third kept moving. Jace turned, but too late. The last hunter was already leaping through the air toward him. Before it landed, the floor collapsed beneath it. Jace had cut the final cable holding the center panel. The hunter fell through, down into the blast chamber. Right into the trap, meant for all of them. But the handler didn't fall for it. It floated calmly above the flames, its cloaking shifting around its armor like liquid shadow. Then it spoke, its voice metallic and deep. "You're not part of this," it said. "Give up the asset and we'll let you live." Jace laughed, spitting blood from his lip. "You think I care about living?" he shouted. "I just care that you suffer." He pressed the final detonator. The entire eastern wall blew open, tearing through the station in a shockwave of fire and steel. The handler vanished in the explosion, engulfed in smoke. Jace was thrown backward, hitting a steel beam hard. Pain shot through his body. His left leg burning, but he was alive. He crawled through the rubble, one hand clutching the rifle, his vision blurry from smoke. Somewhere behind him, the handler emerged. Armor, cracked cloak burned away. It didn't speak now. It just raised its plasma blade and stepped forward. Jace aimed, fired, and hit its chest, but the shot barely slowed it. He kept firing, until the rifle clicked empty. Then, silence. Just before the handler reached him, another sound rang out. A high-pitched hum, followed by a sharp burst of light. The handler jerked, stunned, then froze, sparks flying from its side. Jace blinked, confused. Then he saw Niera, standing at the top of the shaft, holding an ancient shock rifle she had found in the tunnels. Her face was calm, her eyes locked on the enemy. She fired again, this time hitting the creature's shoulder, sending it crashing to the ground. Jace pulled himself up, limping forward as Niera tossed him a fresh charge pack. Together, they approached the broken handler. It tried to rise, but Niera kicked its weapon away and placed the shock rifle against its throat. "You hunted my daughter," she said quietly. "You tried to break her." The handler hissed back, "She is property." Jace didn't hesitate. He aimed down and fired one last shot through the creature's core, ending it with a burst of heat and silence. They stood there a moment, smoke swirling around them. Then Niera lowered her weapon and looked at Jace. "Is it over?" she asked. "For now," he said, "but they'll come again." She nodded slowly. "Then we run again." Jace shook his head. "No," he said. "This time, we make them run." The sky was dark again, but not from storm clouds. Ash drifted through the air like snow, silent and soft. The old mining station burned behind them, glowing in the distance as Jace, Niera, and Leary walked across the ice-covered ridge. Every step hurt, every breath came with frost, but they were alive. Leary walked beside them, holding both their hands. Her feet were wrapped in fresh cloth, her cheeks red from the wind, but she smiled now. Not a forced smile, not broken, a real one. They reached a broken watchtower, half buried in ice. Inside, Jace lit a small fire while Niera checked the beacon they'd pulled from the wreckage. It was cracked, but it worked. A signal pulsed now, blinking steadily. Human militia patrols would see it. Eventually, Jace leaned back against the wall, his ribs bruised, his leg still stiff. But he didn't care. He looked at Leary, now curled in Niera's lap, her small fingers gripping the charm she wore around her neck. You told me once you wanted to burn everything they built, Jace said softly. Niera nodded. I still do. We started something, he said. The recordings. The images, what she remembers, if we send that to the right people. Niera finished the thought. They'll know what the Syndicate has been hiding. It won't stop all of them, Jace added. But it might slow them down. Outside, the wind picked up. Howling across the white world, but in this small tower, warmth remained. Later that night, Leary woke from a dream, crawled beside Jace and whispered, Are we going to stay here forever? Jace looked at her and smiled. No, kid, he said. This is just the start. They spent the next few days gathering supplies, resting, healing, when the human patrol ship finally arrived. Its lights breaking the sky like a second sun. Jace didn't flinch. He stood with Niera and Leary at his side. Rifle in hand, coat torn, eyes steady. The soldiers who stepped out were surprised. They didn't expect survivors. They didn't expect a woman and child wrapped in scavenged gear. Standing behind a man who looked like death warmed over, but when Jace handed them the crystal, and Niera told them what was on it. The officer in charge didn't speak. He simply nodded and called for medics. As they were escorted to the ship, Niera turned to Jace. You could have left us in the snow, she said. You could have let her freeze. Jace looked at Leary, who was now laughing softly in the back seat of the evac shuttle. I know, he said, but she knocked on my door and asked for one hot meal. Niera smiled through tired eyes, and instead, we found a home. They lifted off from the frozen world, leaving fire and ashes behind. The Syndicate would come looking. But now, the galaxy would know. Now, they had names, faces, and proof, and one human who didn't run.